The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, a space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today.
Today we have a question coming to us from Joyce from Kansas City, Missouri. And Joyce writes, "It's hard to decide what is truth and what is fiction coming out of the Iran conflict. But it seems almost all social media and news outlets are asking the same questions. How close is the world to a broader regional war as Iran expands its blockade threats from the Strait of Hormuz to the Sea of Oman and the Red Sea? What are the long-term implications of President Trump's escalating rhetoric, including warnings of potential strikes on level 3 targets? If U.S. negotiations with Iran continue to stall, what diplomatic off-ramps remain, and who has the leverage now?" These are excellent questions, Joyce. Thank you very, very much. Mark, Scott?
Well, I remember last week I mentioned that the British were reporting that the talks were going to resume in this weekend, and they did not. And right now, we don't know who. We know Kushner and Witkoff are going. Whether or not the vice president is going to go, 1 minute he is and the next minute he isn't. So we're really not sure who exactly is going as far as from the American side. And I think they're still working out the logistics of this. However, by all reporting that we're hearing, and again, conflict is where the truth goes to die when it comes to getting information. We don't know really what the status is as far as the talks are concerned.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Trump says, "Hey, you've got 3 days," and Iran says no, and they go, "Okay, a week," and they go no, and he goes, "All right, 10 days, and that's my final offer," and they go no, and he's like, "Okay, 2 weeks,"
Yeah,
and it's just I don't know why anybody would take him seriously at this point. There's no reason to send Vance anywhere because nobody's taking him seriously at all. And it seems to me that Witkoff and Kushner going back is just why are they repeating the same mistakes over and over again? Find yourself some diplomats who have negotiation skills beyond buying a freaking apartment building for too much money and having to be bailed out every single time you buy something, which is what Kushner's background is. And I don't know. I know people who know Witkoff, and they say he's a very smart guy, but he's clearly in over his head here, and he has been since Trump tapped him to be his lead negotiator and diplomat. There's, again, the answer to that was, "Wow, I'm really glad you asked. I'm really flattered." But the answer is no, I'm not qualified. That's what Witkoff should have said. And he hasn't said that, and he's made one incredible blunder after another, and here we are. So as far as spreading to the rest of the region, yeah, I think it already has. I think everywhere you look right now, you're seeing people go reevaluating their position, especially if their guarantee for safety had long been the United States of America. We are no longer considered trustworthy. We are no longer considered to be consistent in our values. We are no longer capable of protecting ourselves, much less anybody else. And people may forget at this point that one of the main reasons why we never wanted Iran to get a bomb is because if Iran had one, Saudi Arabia would want one. If Saudi Arabia had one, somebody else is going to want one, and so on and so forth. And now it was nuclear proliferation in a region that has long been the most unstable region in the world. So this is what we have blundered our way into, and I don't know. Honestly, I have zero idea how we're getting out of this. I said a few weeks ago we do need to finish the job. Once you go in, you need to finish it. Well, we're not getting regime change. That's over. Anybody who was willing to stand up and fight didn't get the support that they needed, and they're probably hanging off a street light somewhere in Tehran. Mass executions still happening. We completely messed that one up by over a month when Trump told them that he had their back. And then when they rose up, the military said, well, actually, Mr. President, we're not in position to help anybody. That was a complete swing and miss. And then the next swing and miss is, you drop bombs, really big bunker buster bombs on targets and stuff like that. We've done is obscure an already fairly obscure situation, and we don't know where this material is. We don't know if it's buried deep. We don't know if it's on a truck being moved somewhere. We don't know anything. We don't have any intelligence. And this was always something that, other presidents have smartly avoided, no matter how much pressure Bibi Netanyahu put on them. And the reason for us going into this war in the first place really does seem to be that Trump figured this was a good way to get my approval numbers up, because look at the approval numbers that George W. Bush had after 9/11, and didn't see the difference between bombing another country and being bombed by another country. And Americans are abandoning him. I mean, he's down to, the latest polls show about 32%. I think I know all of them. I talk to people who are like, oh, you're just listening to the press, and everybody's such naysayers, and nobody understands what's going on with this situation. You got to put your trust in Trump, and he'll get us through this. I mean, all kinds of nonsense like that. But for the most part, the American people have said, no, we don't want to fight this war. We don't want to support this president anymore. And the complications are going to continue for a long time.
Yeah. And it's being reported on the BBC and probably here in the United States as well that Iran says it seized 2 cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz. So, to say that it's open, and I mean, if we look at the history of how this has progressed, just in the information that we receive, it's open, then it's closed, then it's open, then it's closed. We won the war. Well, now the war is still going on. It's just such back and forth that it's almost impossible to be able to say exactly what's going on. We, of course, would hope that we're going to have negotiations that are going to lead to at least something. Would be very, very nice. And I think last week we presented somebody that we thought would be a pretty good option, John Huntsman. Send him. And the more, the more I know, you read about John Huntsman, this is a diplomat. And this is somebody that's worked in numerous administrations. He's a diplomat. He not only was the ambassador to China, he was also the ambassador to Russia. I mean, these are 2 places where, you don't send the rookies. Usually ambassadors are just, it's just somebody was a big donor here, I'm going to make you the ambassador of someplace like France. How hard is that? But when we're talking about nations like China and Russia, that shows you've got some diplomatic chops. And, that's what this requires. This does not require a businessman. This does not require somebody that knows something about real estate. This requires somebody that really, truly understands geopolitics and can, work through this without giving up too much. And then maybe we would actually get some legitimate, solid information that we could trust. Because if we listen to all the other news agencies from around the world, even they don't know. I mean, they can't keep up. And it's getting to the point where we're beginning to look silly.
Yeah, I wanted to point out, I mean, with the seizure of the tanks, and yet we're still hearing from Mr. Trump that, they have no Navy, they have no Air Force, and yet obviously if the Iranians have some capacity for something, because ships are being seized. And I also wanted to point out that to my knowledge regarding these talks, what I have heard is that the Iranians have not even agreed to come unless someone else has heard something different. Trump has said that they're coming, but I mean, Trump isn't a source for anything except more contradiction and confusion and disinformation. So I'm not even clear that the Iranians are coming. And the other is that the downed airmen, the downed U.S. airmen, we've never heard where they are or actually from them, to my knowledge, the ones that the United States supposedly rescued. Where are they? Do either of you know?
Nobody knows.
Where have we actually heard from them directly? So do we actually know that they were actually rescued by the United States and are safely home and are actually here?
Well,
Or have we
haven't
just been
heard anything.
told? Well,
But then again,
that's
that's
the
not
point.
unusual.
Okay.
That
But
truly
I
isn't
mean,
that truly isn't unusual.
is it credible, do you think, that they were actually rescued and are actually home and are here, or that this administration or regime, whatever you want to call it, has said that they are here?
Well, all right.
And
So my
yeah,
feeling on that is that it is too much of a risk to say that you rescued the airmen and have not had done it, because we still do have some very good investigative reporters here in the United States and around the world. And if the story came out that, or it was proven that that was all I'm going to use a administration term, a hoax, that would really hurt not only the administration, but would hurt the military as well, because the military has said, yes, we did this. So I don't know if any administration would want to take the risk of lying about something like that.
Huh.
And I know Scott finds that rather fun, but that Scott could be right as he's laughing at me. That it is possible, of course. I mean, anything. Here's the thing: anything's possible. The sun could not come up tomorrow. That's possible, but I just don't see. I don't see a very big. That's just to me. That's a risky one. I really think that's a risky one.
On March 23rd, 2003, a soldier by the name of Jessica Lynch, Army Private First Class, was with her company. They were ambushed in Iraq. She suffered injuries and was taken prisoner. On April 1st, U.S. Special Forces rescued her and brought her from an Iraqi hospital where she was being convalescing from her injuries, and brought her home. When you do something good, when you do something that shows some ability, you brag about it and you trot them out and you bring them out there. She, Jessica Lynch is alive today. She talks about veterans and shares her story to honor her fallen comrades and stuff. She's very public. We have zero idea who these two pilots, if they even exist, were, or whether this was just something that the administration made up to cover an exercise to recover the uranium or to do something else. Who knows? I mean, the first casualty of war is truth. That there is no way that anybody can believe anything that the Iranians or Donald Trump and his crew are saying. And that's a sad fact that I don't think ever existed before, but that's where we are right now.
I mean, yeah, there's definitely an opportunity that this could be an entire fictitious thing. But in the grand scheme of things, I agree with Scott that normally you would want to really brag this one up, that you did so well. And they did some of that a little bit, but they did it mostly with administration people, Department of Defense people. It's a tough one to sort through. It could go either way in my mind.
So what are we hearing about ongoing Iranian drone strikes? Anything? Like into Iraq, for instance, into Saudi Arabia, into other countries?
Well, right now the big talk is about the Strait.
Right.
I mean, the rest of it seems to be. I mean, you don't hear very much about any attacks into Israel. Not like we were before. So, the Strait really has dominated the news cycle now, and I think it'll continue to do that until such time as either it's whatever's going to happen with it is finally decided.
Even though China is reportedly either has or is going to or may, from my understanding, provide Iran with anti-aircraft support weaponry. Trump called it something else, and I forget what he called it. It was some ridiculous name, which is not anti-aircraft weaponry. And part of our listener's question was of level 3 targets, and I was looking that up. So it depends on what the question means. It's a multi-phase approach. There's phase 3 or level 3, but there's which is that's Iran's escalation ladder. But then there's level 3 targets in defense strategies as reported by third parties. These are local infrastructure.
And I think that's exactly what they're talking about. They're talking about because he's threatened bridges, he's threatened power plants, he's threatened water plants, he's threatened all that, and I think that is what Joyce is talking about when it comes to level 3 targets.
Okay, that would be
they don't have a direct military objective to them. They're not like an air base. They're not like things like that. And these are really the targets. And when they're talking level 3, these are the targets that everybody in the world is saying, well, that's a war crime because they're for attacking civilian infrastructure.
Right. That would be a regional substation, a power plant,
water,
and it's internal infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it's rather, and that's all I can find. And
of course, Joyce, if we're wrong, please write in and let us know. But considering what's been in the news and what has been threatened by the United States as what the next targets are likely to be, that would lead me to believe he's talking that Joyce is talking about level 3 as those targets. That infrastructure that. Yeah, and I think this was made a point by somebody was on one of the news programs said that, well, if you transport military equipment across a major highway in the United States, that is not just civilian, that's used for moving military materials. Right. And that's true. Okay, I got that part. But it's not like I say, it's not an airfield. It's not an intelligence complex. It's none of those things that cannot be confused with something that might be civilian. It's kind of like that crossover kind of thing. Yeah, that bridge is used by the civilians mostly, and maybe the military uses it once or twice to cross over. So the argument then is made, well, that's a legitimate target when, as I say, a lot of people in the world are saying that they're not.
Right, and here's where we get into the Hegseth, no rules of engagement apply, and Trump saying, we don't care about international law, it's whatever I say. And we're getting into ethical relativism, where the ethical boundary is whatever the individual says it is, and that is not ethically defensible from an ethicist's perspective. Typically.
Well, ethics is in the eye of the beholder, plain and simple.
Yeah.
What we consider ethical and what somebody else considers ethical, I mean, it's it's totally subjective.
There's no doubt about that, Brooke. Iran has a decidedly Eastern perspective on things. And we have a very Western, although I think we've abandoned all pretense at ethics in this particular case. Our approaches are very different. Just as interestingly enough, by way of a contrast, there's a fellow by the name of Andrew Hugg, who is was the chief of chemical nuclear surety for the U.S. Army. reportedly got frog marched out of the Pentagon yesterday after video created by James O'Keefe. Remember him, the Project Veritas guy, and
Mm-hmm.
would be Broadway musical star. Filmed this guy speaking to a very attractive female journalist with a hidden camera, and gave up to try to impress her all kinds of military secrets. And he's been put on leave. Now let's jump over to the Wall Street Journal, which reports that Iran has hanged a former employee of its atomic energy organization after the country's Supreme Court confirmed his final sentence of espionage. Mehdi Farid, 48, was arrested for spying for Israel, according to the Organization for Human Rights, Hengo Organization for Human Rights, a Norway-based activist group monitoring Iran. He had extensive cooperation with the Mossad, they said, and they took him out and hanged him. So, there's a qualitative, shall we say, difference in our approach to various things, including our response to espionage and keeping state secrets. And the Iranians play hardball, and we put people on leave.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's just a very different way of looking at things between two countries, where once again I find myself saying that Donald Trump grew up around the mob in New York City. You cannot be a builder without dealing with concrete. And if you dealt with concrete in the 1970s and 80s, that meant that you were dealing with mobsters who controlled it. And I have little doubt that Donald Trump has associated himself with some of the worst people in our country, whether it is Russian mobsters or other kinds of mafia type figures, mobsters of every kind. And yet he is in over his head when it comes to the likes of Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, and these Iranian mullahs and ayatollahs who rule with what he pretends he wants to be, but really probably just doesn't have the stomach for.
Yeah. And in the question was, are we closer to a broader conflict in the region? Well, first of all, when we're talking about a broader conflict, we have to remember China is now quite involved. They're back in the Pakistanis, who are trying to do the negotiation. There is the reports that they're sending material, weapons to the Iranians. That also. So whether or not it becomes, as far as conflict is concerned, like fighting, can it become a larger regional conflict? It's possible. It all depends on what China is actually sending them and what the use would be for them. If they're just sending them material that keeps the strait closed, again, there's economic impact to that. But you see that the Chinese, we've said this before, Iran before this was a minor regional power. Not a lot of teeth to them. Because of this conflict, we have made them pretty much a world power. They're on the world stage. And this has been a great opportunity for China to come in and, first of all, try to pretend to be the peacemaker. Make the United States look bad. And they've done a very, very good job of it. They're not blustering like Trump is blustering. They're not doing any of that stuff. They're doing it just like the Chinese always does things. Very quietly, sometimes behind the scenes, sometimes very subtly in their actions, but their influence is increasing. And if anybody thinks that even if this thing gets over with, that won't be remembered, that they still won't have great influence in that region, more so than what they started out with, you're kidding yourselves, because they will. They will continue to have that influence. And it goes to the negotiations. Yes, they're stalled. I think right now, you've got the Iranians saying, "Well, no, we don't want to do it." I think the Chinese will probably talk them into it because that will make the Chinese look like the great peacemakers. They'll have supplanted us that's what we were supposed to do, but they'll have supplanted us in a different way than we used to conduct world affairs. Our way of conducting world affairs was go in, take out a regime, put in a puppet of ours, which never worked out very well because all of our puppets always seemed to be a bad choice, or project that strength of that military strength as basically the stick. China's being a little bit different. They're not they're not threatening to send their navy. They're not threatening to send boots on the ground. They're not threatening any of these things. They're doing it in a very, I guess I would say, soft power kind of way. And that's always proved very effective. And I think that's something that, again, Trump first of all, I don't think understands it. I think it also puts Witkoff and Kushner at even a larger disadvantage because the Chinese do understand geopolitics, where these guys don't. And that's why I say, and I'm gonna say it now, send Huntsman, John Huntsman, pull him out of retirement and send him, because if there's one diplomat within the United States, retired, whatever, John Huntsman dealt with them at not a very good time. Let him go deal with them. Because in the end, I don't think it's going to be Iranians and the U.S. guiding these things, or the Pakistanis. In the end, the Chinese, with the incompetent people that we have over there, will eventually be the ones orchestrating all of this. I would think.
Yeah, I think it's great. The last week we could not remember John Huntsman's name.
Now we had to look. Yeah, we kept saying, "Who was that guy?" Here we are both Googling who was that guy that it was, and now he's our savior, old John Huntsman.
I got there through the McDonald's thing. That's what I remembered about him. That his father had invented those little styrofoam containers that Big Macs used to come in. So here, the listener's name is what again?
Joyce.
Joyce.
John Huntsman. Joyce. No.
And asking about the region, right? And one of the newer reports, I think, is that Iranian-backed militias that are in Iraq have been firing on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has thousands of drones and missile or rocket attacks against them, including the other side of the peninsula by the Red Sea, where Yambo is, and where that pipeline is supposed to, get some of the oil from one side to the other without having to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran has got that covered because Iranian militias are bombing both Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, I think Bahrain was mentioned. So now we're seeing escalations there on the other side of the Persian Gulf, on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, including Kuwait. I don't know if I mentioned that. So that, the war is getting larger. Now, if it starts to destabilize Iraq, that's another conflict that's going to happen because the Shiites who have allegiance to the Iranians and the Sunnis who have allegiance to the Saudis are going to be fighting in Iraq again. We're going to see that all over again. I mean, the destabilization of this whole thing that Trump set in motion by ripping up an agreement that was working, has been predictably, I think, horrific. And I don't know how. I mean, the day that he tore up that agreement and said, "Okay, we're out," when everybody around him said, "No, Mr. President, you got to stay in it. It's working. They're complying," and he simply could not abide an Obama win by having that deal work. So he tore it up and stepped out and vowed to get a better deal, which he is clearly not going to get. has been to destabilize the region and will lead to a lot more suffering, war, expense, you know, consequences here in the homeland, consequences everywhere. And you know what? I kind of I didn't think I would ever say this, but I think I kind of miss the isolationist Trump, the one who could proclaim that he solved 8 wars where nobody can even figure out what he's talking about, and that just kept to himself. If you look all around the world, wherever he has touched anything, it is a mess. Venezuela is a mess. The same drug cartel that was in charge of helping Colombians smuggle drugs through Venezuela is still in charge in Venezuela. The People's Choice is not in charge in Venezuela. We're not helping Ukraine defeat the Russian army that has invaded them. And, that war is more or less at a standstill with Ukraine making some nice, winning some land back, but at a tremendous price. Really could use our help, but now we're so tied up here. It's only a matter of time. I think North Korea shot a couple of missiles last week. It's only a matter of time before South Korea and Japan decide that they have to go back onto a war footing after decades of relying on the United States to protect them. They can no longer count on the United States to protect them, so they're going to have to do it themselves, and they will become nuclear states before you know it. And another region that is volatile and has a lot of issues is going to be well armed and ready to blow each other up.
Right.
And look at Cuba.
Oh, Cuba's kind of like on the back burner right now, but let's remember where we're at now.
People there are still starving.
Okay.
Yeah, people are suffering greatly.
Yeah, Cuba. Absolutely. Yeah. And now Israel has basically expanded this to Lebanon. We can't forget that. Right. And as Scott points out, and there was reporting that the Japanese are really starting to get rid of their pacifist policy. So how do you think, now you've got Israel does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So that's why this is escalated. What do you think the Chinese are going to think about the Japanese having a nuclear weapon? How's that going to fly?
Ancient enmity there.
Absolutely. I mean, you think that in the Middle East there's a lot of hate. You go Japan and China, there's a huge historical data that says they never really liked each other very much. And now this new prime minister, and I think a lot of it came from, just some of the rhetoric coming out of Trump. So when, she talks about the rhetoric that Trump puts out there, it's not only threatening to blow up bridges and power plants and this, that, and the other in the Iran conflict. It's also some of the things he says that impacts around the world. And I think that China and that Japan scenario that could be really conceived. As I say, if Japan said, you know what, we're going to have a nuclear weapon, the Chinese are not going to stand for that. There's no way. Yeah. And that's all because of Japan looking and saying, all right, the United States has abandoned NATO pretty much. Even though it's not official, but they pretty much abandoned NATO. They have abandoned Ukraine in the face of Russia, which we should have been on top of. They got dragged into this thing in the Middle East, and Israel couldn't even concentrate on Iran the whole time. They had to turn their sights to the Jordanians. I mean, come on. So this is beginning to expand, and then that causes Japan, a place like Japan. South Korea, I'm not sure how big they're going to be on having nuclear weapons, but I mean Japan, that opens up an entire new kettle of fish. Because if there's a country that could come up with has the infrastructure and the technological knowledge to be able to create a nuclear weapon quickly, I would say it would be Japan. They can do it. So it has such far-reaching implications, even beyond what he's the threats he makes in the Iran conflict, regardless of how probably illegal those threats are if they were to be carried out. This just expands out because, like Scott said, Japan's looking at it and saying, we can't rely on the United States anymore. We got to
Yeah.
protect ourselves. And we've got the second or third most nuclear weapons across the bay in our historical enemies, the Chinese. And no, we've got to step it up. We've got to
Yeah.
step it up.
There's nothing that we could do right now if
No,
China decided to invade Taiwan.
no,
There's nothing we could do to stop that.
no, not at all.
So currently, then, who do you feel has the leverage, to go back to Joyce's questions?
Yeah, here's a fascinating thing. Iran could give up their nukes because they've discovered a much more powerful weapon.
Yep.
And it's the Strait of Hormuz and their control of it. They get to decide who gets oil and who doesn't. And right now, India is suffering tremendously because they're not getting the oil that they need, and not just oil for gasoline, but oil for all kinds of petrochemical products and things like that. There are countries that are not getting food. There are countries that are not getting fertilizer. There are countries that are not getting, products that they need for day-to-day life, and plastics and different petrochemical things. All of this stuff is going on forever. And how about this for the final insult to the American people? Scott Bessent is considering a financial bailout of the UAE, of the United Arab Emirates, a financial bailout, because right now all their money is tied up in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf, and they can't get it out. And they are hurting. So they have asked the United States for a financial bailout, which will mean taxpayer money going to a country whose leaders have only recently made Donald Trump and his children and Steve Witkoff and his children extremely wealthy by buying their worthless bitcoins, or whatever they're called, the cryptocurrency, and propping that up. I forget what it was, like $50 billion going directly to Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, and their families. And now the United States taxpayers are going to be paying the freight for that because they owe the UAE that money. It is a sickening situation to be put as a cherry on top of a huge shit sundae that we're all being asked to eat.
Yep, I agree. And you know what? Joyce, you asked who has the leverage. Personally, I think the Chinese do. I think of all of everybody involved in this, whether it be, behind the scenes or whatever, I think the Chinese have got them exactly where they want us. As Scott said, if they were to take Taiwan tomorrow, there's nothing we could do about it. We couldn't do anything about it. And I think that concept, that is a possibility. I think that is going to create a world that's far more dangerous in the end, because you're going to have the Japanese and the Chinese looking at each other with nuclear weapons. And I agree with Scott in the sense that I think right now the Iranians are saying, why would we spend money on a nuclear weapon? We have a great amount of power, and we didn't even realize it before because nobody ever closed the Strait of Hormuz before.
Right.
And now we've realized it. Holy shit! We're pretty powerful right now. And why go to all the expense? And let's face it, you got all these nuclear weapons. Only one country's ever used one. Nobody else. I mean, the Russians haven't used it against the Ukrainians, thank God. If China took Taiwan, they're not going to use it. They're going to do it with the conventional weapons that they have. The idea of nuclear weapons being a deterrent,
Right.
it's kind of a night. It's a post Cold War. Well, it's a Cold War mentality that probably does not exist, because there have been times when people could sit back and say, "Oh, we have nuclear weapons. Maybe we should have used them." Now, those are foolish people that would say that, but the fact is they've never been used. They sit. They're just the threat. So
I forget what the name of the plan was at the end of the at the end a period of time at the end of World War II before 1949. There was a literal plan that the United States military had drawn up, which called for us to use tactical nuclear weapons to get what we wanted from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
It was never enacted, but it was planned for and it was feasible. Feasibility studies proved that we could do it. And it was only when the Soviet Union exploded a nuclear bomb of their own that those plans were quietly taken and thrown into the bottom drawer and shut and locked forever. Now we find ourselves in another phase of warfare. Man's ability to make war on other men. The power of nuclear weapons is probably a lot closer to the power of gunpowder than it is to AI
yeah,
and AI powered drones and missiles and things like that, and cyber warfare. Um, all of these things are supplanting the use of nuclear weapons, and will be the next decisive thing. And we're talking about expanding our military budget by quite a bit to build ships that would have been good to fight the last war. And we're more or less ignoring the fact that we could take the money that it would take to build one battleship, and we could build tens of thousands of drones that would actually be decisive in a war against that battleship. And we've really just lost the thread. Just to build, Mark, if I may, on something that you said about China,
hmm
which I agree with. One of the reasons that Scott Bessent is talking about funding the UAE is because Emirati officials told the US that if the UAE runs short of dollars, it's going to be forced to use Chinese yuan or other currencies for oil sales and other transactions. In that scenario, the implicit threat to the US is to the dollar, which currently reigns supreme among global currencies because of its near exclusive use in oil transactions. And the UAE central bank is claiming that if they run out of dollars and they can't get any more dollars, and they're not going to get any more dollars because Iran has declared that anybody who wants to get a ship through the Strait of Hormuz has to pay in Chinese yuan, that the Chinese currency is going to supplant the US currency as the reserve currency for the entire world.
yep,
And this would mean a disaster for the United States and a great benefit to the Chinese, who
yeah,
now become not the world's economic superpower. And yet another thing that Trump blundered into without thinking about it, and we're already seeing it happen.
right. And if you look back, our first podcast when we started this, kind of apropos, we talked about the stability instability paradox, which was from Glenn Snyder, and we're seeing that play out right now. And basically, that paradox, very briefly, says that if you have two countries that have the ability of assured total destruction on each other, such as within nuclear weapons, they are less likely to get engaged in large conflicts or get into conflicts that are either by proxy, or if they get into conflict with each other, fight it with conventional weaponry simply because they don't want nuclear war. They understand that nobody wins nuclear war. And that's it's kind of interesting. I was kind of looking through the archives of our podcast. That was the first thing we talked about, was the stability instability paradox, and it's really showing itself today of how this is progressing. And if and I'll go back to China and Japan again. If it goes to that, once again, now they're not going to have the mutual, assured destruction, but it does make the world and the chance of more proxy wars or conventional conflict a lot more possible. So Who has the leverage now? I'm saying China. I think they've got all the leverage right now
Well,
because
Iran and
we've
China.
given it to them pretty much.
Yep. We've made Iran a power player in the world.
Yep.
And China will, of course, take advantage of that as they quietly go about their business.
Yep.
And will benefit from Tehran's antagonism towards the U.S. dollar in the United States of America. Makes perfect sense.
And let's remember, the Chinese base a lot of what they do off what Trump says. It's almost like having a blowhorn of, hey, this is what we're going to do, China. Now sit down for like 5 minutes and just figure out a way around it. And the Chinese are pretty doggone good about it. Go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, so how do you see all this playing out then? Will China, the Chinese, of course, think in much, much longer spans of time than we do. And typically, when Chinese negotiators and negotiators from Asia in general, sit down with American negotiators, even when the Chinese or other negotiators have less time and more to lose, their situation is more urgent, they come away much better than the American negotiators, because they're just better negotiators.
And that doesn't have to be, Brooke. We're sending bad negotiators to negotiate.
Oh, now, yes, but I mean, typically because of how we Americans view time and our typical rush and equation of fast being the same as being effective typically. And also, the Chinese and other Asian people, they tend to smile and they will agree when they don't really agree. And of course, they're a high context culture, and we're a low context culture in the language. So we say very clearly and distinctly what we mean, whereas in a high context culture, much is left unsaid and has to be interpreted. And it's an entirely different way of thinking and negotiating. And generally speaking, Americans do not do well. And with the people we have today, we're going to come off from this, I think, extremely badly.
Well, and you also got to remember, when you're talking about how we view things, the United States, if we look at the way we have viewed geopolitics post-World War II, we're still stuck in the mid 20th century. China is more in the 21st century. They don't look at it the same way. I think Scott said, we're not, a couple of weeks ago, we weren't prepared to fight this war. We are prepared to fight a war like World War II. We could do that, but fight a war of the 21st century, maybe not so much. We found out that a $50,000 drone can bring down a $35 million airplane. I mean, we always had that might makes right kind of attitude that basically won us World War II. I mean, it did. It was very successful then. But the world has moved on from that kind of mentality. And, right now, we're not only playing a game by old rules, we're playing against somebody that basically invented the new rules, and I would say that would be China.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Sun Tzu said war is ultimately a moral venture, then we have lost the moral part of this war by these strikes. I mean,
Absolutely.
we set up a meeting for Monday morning and bombed them on Saturday night when they got together to talk about what they wanted to talk about on Monday morning. There's no more deceitful and harshly deceptive thing in the world that anybody is. That's Pearl Harbor times a million. What were we thinking when we did that? And
we weren't.
It's ridiculous. Right. I mean, look, and I was all for taking out the Ayatollah in June when Israel said they were presented with the chance. But we needed to be ready for this, and we were completely not ready to do what we did when we did it. It was an opportunity, and the New York Times has done really good reporting on this. That pretty much most of the room said no, don't do this, and Trump just was so desperate for a win that he said, "Oh, we're going to take the leaders of Iran out, and we're going to deal with the aftermath after."
Or he was desperate for a distraction.
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing I'm kind of with you there on the Epstein thing, but I really do think that one of the things that he's distracting us from is the fact that he's grabbing as much money as he can with both hands for him and his family, and enriching himself in ways beyond. I mean, $10 billion from the IRS for a lawsuit over his leaked tax returns. Just ridiculous stuff. He's just trying to grab up as much money as he can, and he'll walk away and leave us holding the bag. No doubt about it. Like whoever is going to be following up Donald Trump, and it could happen sooner rather than later, I suppose. But whoever's left holding that bag is going to be in a really, really bad way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And just getting back to another point I was trying to make earlier. Apparently, there were meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank last week in Washington, D.C., and the Treasury Department sent representatives to talk to the Gulf states and say, you need to give us a list of everything that you need to do to repair your infrastructure and rebuild your economies, and we're going to put you in front of the line for anybody who needs money from the United States of America. So that's taxpayer money that is going to be used to rebuild a country that is run by gazillionaires.
Yeah.
And it's really just unseemly to me.
Yep. Well, Joyce, hopefully we answered that as best we could.
Yes. I wish I could have come up with a nicer answer and a more positive outlook, but I can't.
You and me both.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately today there's really very little to be happy and joyful about. I mean, that's simply how it is, unfortunately, and it is not wonderful.
And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium dedicated to providing solutions to social and political issues for NGOs and international government agencies. Through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research, the Phoenix Research Group advances understanding and practical strategies for complex challenges. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.